Detective Corbin Vance was an anachronism, a walking fossil from an era of messy, illogical humanity. In the gleaming, harmonious metropolis of Aethel, he was the only detective left who operated on intuition, a word most citizens now associated with a programming flaw. He was unchipped. His mind, a chaotic tangle of gut feelings, biases, and unfiltered emotion, was a relic in a city where every other citizen was equipped with the clarity chip, a neural implant that optimized thought for perfect logic and serene efficiency. He was currently concluding a case of corporate espionage, a dispute between two biotech firms. The two CEOs sat opposite him, their expressions perfectly calm, their arguments flawlessly logical. But Corbin wasn't listening to their words. He was watching their hands. One CEO's hands were perfectly still. The other's thumb was rubbing a tiny, almost imperceptible circle on the arm of his chair. A repetitive, subconscious, nervous gesture. A tell. In a world without overt tells, Corbin had learned to read the ghosts of them. Corbin, his voice is a low, gravelly rumble, out of place in the pristine room. Mr. Silas, your company's encryption was breached from an internal server. The data points to your rival. He paused, his eyes fixed on the other man. But my gut points to the man whose thumb is about to wear a hole in his chair. You staged the breach yourself to collect the insurance. The second CEO's thumb stopped moving. His placid expression didn't change, but his biometric readouts, displayed on Corbin's private data pad, flickered for a fraction of a second. A spike in cortisol. The lie detected. Corbin had just solved a multi-million credit case with a twitch. It was a victory that always left him feeling empty and profoundly alone. He was walking back to his office through the serene, silent plazas of Aethel when the call came. It wasn't a corporate dispute. It was a Priority 1 alert from Central Command, a level of you. The plaza was a scene of impossible chaos. In a city where voices were never raised, a woman was screaming. She was surrounded by a circle of calm, curious citizens, who looked at her not with fear or pity, but with the detached confusion of a network observing a corrupted file. Her face was a mask of primal fury, an expression so alien in this placid world that it looked like a special effect. At her feet lay the mangled, twisted remains of the Harmony, a beloved kinetic sculpture whose perfectly balanced movements had been a symbol of the city's own logical grace. She had torn it apart with her bare hands. Corbin pushed through the crowd. His unchipped mind was assaulted by the raw, unfiltered emotion radiating from the woman, a feeling so rare in Aethel it was almost physically painful. He knelt down, his old-fashioned trench coat seeming impossibly out of place. What's your name? Why did you do it? It was a lie. A perfect, moving, beautiful lie. The ship leaves the port, and over the years, you replace every single board, every sail, every rope. When it returns, is it the same ship? Is it? It kept moving, but it was never the same. Never the same. She collapsed, her mind finally crashing under the weight of an idea she could not process. The ship of Theseus. A simple, ancient, philosophical paradox. As the city's automated peacekeeper drones finally moved in to sedate her, a figure in a crisp, white uniform approached Corbin. It was Chief Inspector Thorne, Corbin's superior and a man whose faith in the clarity chip was absolute. A tragic malfunction. Spontaneous logic cascade failure. Very rare. Her chip must have had a flaw in its primary reasoning matrix. I'll have the engineers write a patch. Case closed. Get the scene sterilized. Chief, she was talking about a paradox. This wasn't a malfunction. Someone fed this to her. Vance, your insistence on finding narrative where there is only data is why you remain a detective of trivialities. It was a glitch. File the report and go home. Thorne walked away, the case officially closed. But Corbin knew it was just beginning. Corbin took the case files to his department's tech analyst, Ilara, a young, brilliant, and fully chipped woman who viewed Corbin's methods with a mixture of fascination and academic condescension. Detective, I've run the diagnostics as you asked. The victim, Lyra, received an encrypted data packet 2 hours before the event. It was sent from an anonymous, ghost-routed server. I'll try to trace it, but it's unlikely I'll find anything. Forget the source for a minute. What was in the packet? That's the strange part. It wasn't a virus. It wasn't a subliminal weapon or a psychoactive frequency. I've decrypted it. It's just a text file. She brought it up on the main holographic display. It's an old-world philosophical treatise. A beautifully written, elegant exploration of the ship of Theseus' paradox. And that's it? No malicious code? Corbin stared at the elegant, ancient text floating in the air. Harmless. To their messy, illogical, ancestral minds, perhaps. But to a mind that had been surgically optimized for pure, linear, flawless logic for its entire life, a true paradox wasn't a puzzle. It was a contradiction that could not be computed. It was an error that would force a total system crash. No, kid. It's not harmless. He looked at the text, then at the file detailing the twisted metal of the sculpture in the plaza, and the broken woman in the cognitive facility. This is the murder weapon. Elara looked at him, her perfectly logical mind unable to make the connection. She saw a text file. He saw the beginning of a new kind of war. He was staring at the first shot, fired directly into the heart of their perfect, peaceful, and dangerously fragile utopia. Detective Corbin Vance stared at the elegant, ancient text floating in the air of his lab. The ship of Theseus. A harmless philosophical puzzle to an unchipped mind like his, a mind accustomed to ambiguity. But to the citizens of Aethel, whose thoughts were guided by the flawless, linear logic of the clarity chip, it was a weapon. A weapon that had turned a woman's mind into a catastrophic, recursive loop of error messages, ending in a violent system crash. His first act was to defy his superior. He logged the case not as a malfunction, but as unlawful cognitive assault. An act that earned him a furious, but ultimately helpless, reprimand from Chief Inspector Thorne. Corbin was a relic, but he was a relic with a badge, and he would follow the trail. His partner in this unsanctioned investigation was the tech analyst, Elara. She was a product of the system, her mind a beautiful, logical, and orderly place. The concept of an idea being a weapon was something she found deeply illogical. There must be a secondary component, detective. A subliminal trigger, a microfrequency embedded in the text file. The paradox itself is just data. It cannot be dangerous. In this city, Elara, an illogical idea isn't just data. It's poison. We need to find the pharmacist. Their investigation led them away from the gleaming, sterile towers of the corporate sector and into the forgotten corners of Aethel, the fringe, communities of artists, historians, and philosophers whose professions and unoptimized minds were considered inefficient relics by the mainstream. Here, in dusty, hidden libraries filled with forbidden physical books and in quiet cafes that smelled of real, inefficiently grown coffee, logic was not a law, it was a topic of debate. Corbin felt at home here. Elara, on the other hand, was like a sterile machine in a vibrant, chaotic garden. She was unsettled by the loud arguments, the passionate displays of emotion, the sheer, messy illogic of it all. Their search for the author of the logic bomb led them to one name, whispered with a mixture of reverence and fear. Professor Kale, a brilliant philosopher who had been a vocal critic of the clarity chip before he was retired from the Central University and silenced. They found Kale in a sprawling apartment filled to the ceiling with thousands of physical books, a library of heresy in a city of data slates. He was a calm, ascetic man in his late 60s, with eyes that seemed to see the logical fallacies in everything. He greeted Corbin with a knowing smile. Detective Vance. The unchipped. I've followed your career with some interest. A man who still believes in the value of a hunch. You are a rare and endangered species. To what do I owe the pleasure? I'm investigating the incident in the plaza. A woman's chip was crashed by a philosophical paradox. Fascinating. A truly elegant form of protest. A whisper that can deafen an entire system. It's almost poetic. This protest resulted in a violent psychotic break. The next one could be worse. Do you know who might be capable of such a thing? Capable? Any mind that values questions more than answers. But who would have the will? Who would have the courage to try and wake a city that is so happily, so peacefully, asleep? He looked from Corbin's rugged face to Ilara's clean, logical one. Your partner, for instance. Her mind is a beautiful, perfect cage. She must be so very, very safe in there. And so very, very bored. Ilara shifted, unsettled. For the first time, someone had described her life, her entire existence, as boring. The thought was a new, and deeply illogical, one. This isn't a game, Professor. This is a weapon. Of course it is. The most powerful weapon ever devised. An idea. But a weapon can be used for liberation as well as destruction, detective. He stood up, his visit with them clearly over. Be careful. The man you are looking for does not see himself as a terrorist. He sees himself as a liberator. And a liberator's next target is always the most powerful symbol of the system he wishes to overthrow. As they left Cale's apartment, his words echoed in Corbin's mind. The most powerful symbol of the system. It wasn't a building. It wasn't a person. It was the system itself. The city's central AI. The Oracle. The vast, benevolent intelligence that managed the logic flow of every clarity chip in Aethel. Ilara, he's going to do it again. But not to one person. To everyone. That's impossible. The Oracle's firewalls have never been breached. You don't breach a firewall with a book of poetry. He's not going to hack it. He's going to teach it a lesson it can't understand. He's going to upload a new logic bomb, a bigger one, and crash the entire network. Ilara's logical mind recoiled from the idea. The Oracle was a god. It was infallible. But then she remembered the look in Cale's eyes, the quiet confidence of a man who believed he was wielding a divine power. For the first time, she chose to trust Corbin's messy, illogical intuition over her own chip sense of perfect security. They raced to the Oracle's chamber, a vast, silent, spherical room at the very heart of the city. In the center, a single public access terminal glowed. And sitting there, his face calm and serene, was the man they had just left. Professor Cale. A system-wide alert began to chime gently through the chamber. Attention citizens. A mandatory ethical framework update is being broadcast to all clarity chips. Please take a moment to integrate this new knowledge. He had uploaded his new logic bomb. A paradox so simple and so profound it was designed to be unbreakable. The liar's paradox. This statement is false. A sentence that would force every one of the millions of perfectly logical, chipped minds in the city into an infinite, recursive loop of self-contradiction. Corbin and Ilara looked out through the chamber's glass walls at the city beyond. And they saw it begin. The citizens walking in the plaza below suddenly stopped. Their calm, placid expressions began to twitch. A flicker of confusion appeared in their eyes. Then frustration. Then, a rising, silent, psychic scream as millions of minds hit a logical wall they could not get past. The beautiful, peaceful city of Aethel was frozen, its mind broken, standing on the brink of a collective, cognitive collapse. The city of Aethel held its breath. On the Grand Proscenium Plaza, in the transit hubs, in the sterile corporate offices, millions of citizens stood frozen, their faces placid but their eyes flickering with a profound, internal chaos. Their clarity chips, the engines of their logical minds, were caught in the infinite, recursive loop of the liar's paradox. A single sentence, "This statement is false," had become a digital cage for every mind in the city. In the Oracle chamber, Professor Cale watched the scene through the glass walls, his expression not of triumph, but of serene, philosophical satisfaction. He did not resist as Corbin disarmed him and placed him in restraints. "I have given them a gift, detective. The gift of doubt. The pain of a thought that cannot be resolved. I have forced them to become human again." Illara was at the main console, her own chipped mind fighting against the paradoxical wave, her natural intellect finding ways to buffer the command. Her face was pale, her hands flying across the holographic interface, displaying the city's neural network status. It was a sea of angry, spiking red light. "He's right, Corbin. This isn't just a broadcast, it's a recursive virus of pure logic. Their chips are trying to solve an unsolvable problem. They're caught in an infinite processing loop. The energy consumption, they're redlining across the city. If we don't stop it, their chips will suffer a cascade burnout. It will cause mass, irreversible brain damage. Can you shut it down? Send a counter-signal." "How? How do you send a logical command to counteract a paradox? Any command I send will just be absorbed into the loop." "You can. Fight a ghost with a sword." Corbin looked at the frozen citizens, their bodies still but their minds screaming. He looked at Kale, the man who had weaponized a question. And he looked at Illara, a genius of logic, completely stumped because for the first time, she faced a problem that logic could not solve. It was in that moment that Corbin Vance, the unchipped, the anachronism, the man who operated on gut feelings and messy intuition, understood. You don't fight a paradox with a better piece of logic. You fight it with something that exists outside the system entirely. Illara. Don't try to solve the problem. Just, change the subject. The emergency broadcast system. You have access to it, right? Can you override that educational update? Yes, but with what? What message can possibly untangle this? Not a message. Not an order. Something, inefficient. He pointed to a small, dusty terminal in the corner, the one connected to the city's deep storage cultural archives, a library of the illogical, emotional art of the before times. Find me a song. As Illara, acting on Corbin's desperate, illogical hunch, broadcast the song over the emergency network, a new stream of data was injected directly into the minds of every citizen. It was not data of logic, but of pure, unfiltered human emotion. A song about loss, about love, about the beautiful, painful messiness of a life that did not make sense that in the minds of the citizens, trapped in their infinite loop, this new data was a shock. It was a variable they could not compute, a sound that did not follow the rules. And it gave their processors a new path. Faced with the choice between an unsolvable logical paradox and the raw, emotional data of the music, their minds, their human minds, flinched away from the paradox and latched onto the feeling. Across the city, the citizens of Aethel awoke as if from a trance. They looked around, not with the serene placidity of before, but with a new, profound confusion. And for the first time, they felt the song. A woman in the plaza began to weep, not knowing why. A man on a transport began to laugh. The perfect, sterile peace was broken by a wave of messy, unpredictable, and beautiful human emotion. Professor Kale watched, his eyes wide with a look of profound, ironic fascination. Corbin's illogical solution had, in its own way, completed his life's work. Remarkable, detective. Truly remarkable. Corbin cuffed the now compliant professor. The crisis was over. A week later, the city of Aethel was not the same. It was louder. It was more chaotic. There were arguments in the plazas. There were artists painting strange, emotional murals on the pristine white walls. And there was music. The city council, in a state of profound shock and re-evaluation, had unlocked the cultural archives. The perfect utopia had collapsed, but in its place, something new, something more real, was being born. The final scene shows Corbin Vance walking through the city plaza. He is no longer an anachronism. He is just a man. He sees Illara, who is sitting on a bench, listening to a piece of music on her datapad, her face a mixture of sadness and wonder. She sees him and smiles, a real, genuine, and slightly crooked smile. Corbin looks up at the towers of his city, a city he no longer hates. He had not restored the old order, he had been the accidental midwife to a new one. And for the first time in his life, the unchipped, illogical, flawed detective felt like he was finally home. 6 months after the awakening, the city of Aethel was a glorious, chaotic mess. The serene, silent hum of perfect logic had been replaced by the vibrant, discordant symphony of human emotion. Art, explosive and abstract, covered pristine white walls once dedicated to efficiency metrics. Music, passionate and unpredictable, spilled from open doorways. And arguments, loud, illogical, and wonderfully human, were now a daily occurrence. Detective Corbin Vance, the unchipped relic, had become the city's most reluctant and most necessary citizen. His new job was less about solving crimes and more about mediating feelings. He stood now between two neighbors, one a sculptor and one a musician, who were having a furious debate about the artistic merit of a new, dissonant song. It has no structure. No form. It's just noise. It's not about form. It's about how it makes you feel. It's the sound of anger and joy all at once. He watched them stomp off in opposite directions, still arguing. It was messy. It was inefficient. And it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The city was finally alive. But its new, chaotic life had not gone unnoticed by its creators. That afternoon, they arrived. A fleet of 3 ships, appearing in orbit without warning. They were not military vessels. They were pristine, white, corporate cruisers, as sterile and perfect as a surgical suite. On their hulls was a single, elegant logo, Clarity Corporation. The makers of the chip. A citywide announcement, overriding all public screens, declared their purpose, a routine diagnostic and system integrity audit. Corbin knew it was a lie. This wasn't an audit. It was a recall. The leader of the Clarity Corp delegation was a woman named Director Serafina Thorne. She was the spiritual and corporate successor to the city's old chief inspector, sharp, intelligent, and radiating an aura of absolute, unshakable faith in her company's product. She stepped out of her shuttle into the main plaza, her stark white uniform a rebuke to the colorful, chaotic graffiti that now adorned the walls. She looked at the new Aethel not with curiosity, but with the quiet horror of an engineer seeing her perfect machine overrun with beautiful, chaotic weeds. Corbin and Illyra, who was now a key member of the city's new governing council, met her in the plaza. Detective Vance. And Ms. Illyra. I have read the reports on the awakening. A fascinating, if tragic, systemic cascade failure. I am here to help you restore your city to optimal functionality. Our city is functioning just fine, Director. It's just a little louder than it used to be. Loud? Detective, it is diseased. I see inefficiency. I see emotional contagion. I see a society that has abandoned logic for the primitive chaos of its ancestors. You have not been liberated, you have been corrupted. For the next 2 days, Thorne and her team of white uniformed technicians toured the city. They took readings. They scanned citizens. They documented the arguments, the art, the music. They saw a thriving, messy new culture. But in their reports, they used words like systemic degradation, cognitive infection, and emotional hysteria. They were not seeing a society, they were seeing a broken product. The final confrontation took place in the old council chambers. Director Thorne stood before Corbin, Illyra, and the city's new leaders. My audit is complete. The results are conclusive. The citywide network of Clarity chips has been compromised by a hostile, paradoxical idea. The system's core logic has been bypassed, leading to rampant emotional and cognitive inefficiency. In accordance with Section 7, Paragraph 4 of the end-user license agreement signed by this city's founders, Clarity Corp is contractually obligated to intervene when product integrity is threatened. Director Thorne looked at them, her expression not one of malice, but of serene, absolute certainty, the look of a doctor about to administer a necessary, painful cure. I am authorizing a system-wide hard reset. My ships in orbit will issue a synchronized, buffered pulse to every Clarity chip in the city. The pulse will wipe all aberrant emotional data from the past 6 months and restore the chip's primary logic matrix to its factory settings. A wave of shock and horror went through the room. You can't do that. You're talking about wiping their minds. Erasing their experiences. Erasing who they've become. I am talking about fixing a bug. I am restoring a product to its optimal, peaceful, and logical state. The state your people agreed to when they accepted the gift of clarity. She looked at the clock. The reset pulse is scheduled for 12 hours from now. I suggest you prepare your citizens for a moment of brief cognitive dissonance, followed by a return to harmonious efficiency. There is nothing you can do to stop it. She turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving them in stunned silence. They had won their freedom from a philosophical tyrant, only to have it taken away by a corporate contract. The city had 12 hours, before its new, chaotic, beautiful soul was scheduled for deletion. 12 hours. The city of Aethel, a civilization that had just begun to learn the messy, beautiful art of feeling, had been given 12 hours before its mind was scheduled for deletion. In the old council chambers, Corbin Vance stood with Alara and the city's other new, impromptu leaders. Despair was a palpable new emotion in the room. We can't fight their fleet. They could vaporize this chamber from orbit. We have no weapons, no military. Alara, and even if we did, would we use them? Would our first act as a free, emotional people be one of violence? We can't become the thing we're fighting against. Corbin looked at the faces around him, at the fear. The anger, the confusion. He knew they couldn't fight Clarity Corp on their terms. A battle of ships and weapons was a battle they would lose. But the first battle, the one that started all this, had been a battle of ideas. And that was a battle they could win. No. We won't fight their ships. We will fight their contract. He turned to Alara. Thorne thinks she's here to fix a broken product. She's broadcasting that justification to the whole sector, framing this as of recall. We need to show the galaxy that we are not a product. We are a people. You're the tech genius, Alara. Can you get me access to the citywide broadcast network? I can do better. I can patch you into the same subspace frequency Thorne is using for her own fleet communications. The whole sector will hear you. Good. Then I'm going to engage the director in a public debate. It's a stall. But it's more than that. It's a platform. He then looked at Alara, his eyes intense. While I'm keeping her busy, you need to do the impossible. You can't stop the reset pulse from being sent. Can you change what it does when it arrives? Alara's eyes widened as she understood his insane, brilliant gambit. It was a race. A public debate for the soul of the city, and a secret, desperate hack for its mind. For the next several hours, the city, and indeed the entire sector, watched an unprecedented event. The live, broadcasted debate between the unchipped detective of a failed city and the powerful director of Clarity Corporation. The facts are simple. The citizens of Aethel entered into a contract. We provided them with a life of perfect peace and efficiency. Their own actions, their embrace of illogical, chaotic data, represents a fundamental breach of that contract. We are not punishing them. We are restoring their service to its original, optimal state. You talk about contracts and service. We are talking about people. You say you gave us peace. I say you gave us a cage. A comfortable, quiet cage. But a cage nonetheless. The door has been opened. And now you are furious that the inhabitants have learned to sing. While Corbin battled Thorn with rhetoric and philosophy, Elara was in the Oracle Chamber, the heart of the network, engaged in a battle of pure code. She was writing a patch, a virus not of destruction, but of evolution. The hard reset pulse was designed to find all aberrant, emotional data and delete it. Elara's patch would give every chip a new, primary directive. It would not delete the emotional data. It would integrate it. It would take the chaotic, messy feelings of the last 6 months and weave them permanently into the core logic of the chip, forcing logic and emotion to coexist. It was an act of forced enlightenment. You want to reset us? You can't. Because you can't erase the memory of a true laugh. You can't erase the feeling of seeing a beautiful piece of art. You can't erase the pain of a broken heart. You can't erase humanity. You can only suppress it. And we will not be suppressed again. On her ship, Director Thorn gave the final, cold command. Begin the pulse transmission. In the Oracle Chamber, Elara slammed her hand on her console. Patch uploaded. Across the city, every citizen felt the pulse. A wave of pure, logical data washed through their minds. They felt the command, erase. Forget. Reset. But then, Elara's patch, the ghost of a new idea, kicked in. Integrate. Synthesize. Evolve. There was a moment of profound, collective, mental silence. A city holding its breath. Then, a new feeling. The raw, chaotic emotions of the past 6 months did not vanish. Instead, they settled. The raging fire of anger was banked, becoming the controlled flame of passion. The paralyzing grief became a gentle, melancholic understanding. The logic and the emotion, once at war, now found a new, complex, and beautiful harmony. On the bridge of the Vigilance, Director Thorn watched her diagnostic screens in horror. The citizens were not resetting. Their neural activity was not returning to the flat, placid line of pure logic. It was blossoming into a new, intricate pattern she had never seen before, a perfect, stable synthesis of logic and feeling. Her cure had not worked. It had made them stronger. She had lost. With a quiet, defeated fury, she gave the order to her fleet. Withdraw. Corbin and Elara stood in the plaza, watching the Clarity Corp ships vanish from the sky. The city around them was waking up, not to the sterile peace of the past, but to a new, more challenging, and more complete existence. The final scene takes place a year later. The city of Aethel is vibrant. There is art, there is music, there is debate. There is still sadness, and anger, and conflict. But there is also joy, and love, and a profound understanding. Corbin Vance stands on a balcony, watching the new city, a city he helped to birth. Elara joins him. Elara, it's not perfect. They had faced down a corporation that wanted to own their minds. And they had won, not by destroying the technology that had once imprisoned them, but by seizing it, by teaching it how to be as messy, as flawed, and as magnificent as they were. They had found the perfect harmony, not in pure logic, but in the beautiful, chaotic, and unending conversation between the heart and the mind.